This is Heather Christie, and I'm here today with Dr. Eric Cole. Hey, Eric, how are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you. I think that what you're about to share with our network is such incredibly important information. So we started to go live, and then I got a note that we weren't live. So maybe we're doing this twice. I don't quite know. But just a really brief background on Dr. Cole, and I will share more in the LinkedIn notes as well. So he is a recognized expert in cybersecurity. He's been in this industry for over 30 years. Tremendous background, starting with the CIA. And I don't know how much you can tell us about what you did with the CIA, but even just like a little bit of information would be fun. But all the way to some C-level positions within Fortune 500 companies in the technology space and cybersecurity. So the reason that I've asked Eric to be on this session with us is I really want to understand what are some of the issues that we're facing right now, having made this really fast shift to remote workforce, when in a lot of cases, companies were not otherwise set up or prepared to be fully remote. So can we just start the big picture? Is this something we should all be paying attention to right now?
Absolutely. If we go back before Corona, which I know just seems bizarre, it's like taken over and changed our world. But if we go pre-Corona, cybersecurity was a major problem. You had individuals, companies, governments, hacking entities. And the big problem is because these attacks were stealthy and data focused, many companies had no idea how bad the problem was. Now with Corona, it's like pouring jet fuel on the fire. It has just made it so much easier for attackers to break in, steal information. And it's for several reasons. First, with the remote workforce, most companies, let's face it, weren't prepared for this. They weren't prepared to allow their entire company to work remotely. So what they did is they're opening up access from their internal servers to the internet, which is really bad, or they're just very hastily moving everything to the cloud and not really worrying about security. They're only focusing on functionality, not security, which makes it very easy for attackers to break in. Second, the people that are monitoring our security, known as Security Operations Center, they are scaled back. They're not allowed to have 20 or 30 people. They're scaled back by 60 or 70%. And therefore, they're not able to detect as many attacks. And then third, because people are so scared, the attackers are using direct targeting campaigns where they're sending emails to you, me, and all of our listeners looking like it came from the CDC, saying critical information. Your family might be impacted by Corona. Find out now, get tested immediately. Now, with all the hysteria out there, everyone's going to click on that. Nobody's thinking about cybersecurity. They're thinking about survival. And therefore, they are clicking on these at a ridiculous rate and just making it too easy for the adversary to break in.
So what kind of increase have you seen in attacks since the coronavirus really has become global?
We've seen from a spear phishing attack where we're seeing the direct phishing campaigns with Corona, we've seen those emails increase by over 300%. And then the attack traffic against the United States from China, North Korea, and Russia, which are the three primary components we look at, has increased by 150%. So what I tell all my clients is if you're not seeing the attack, if you don't think your computer's compromised, it's not because it's not happening. It's because you're not looking in the right place.
Okay, you've just given me a lot to digest. Okay, so let me be the first to say, when it comes to technology, it can be my friend, but it's not always. So you're working with somebody who's got a very low level of technological savvy. Starting off with, well, we're going to cover a lot, but let's start with spear phishing. You said that those campaigns are up over 300%. Can you give me a sort of a layperson description of what is spear phishing and why should we be worried about that?
So a phishing or spear phishing attack is where they're targeting an individual with a very well-crafted message that's meant to get you emotional, engage you with the ultimate aim of you clicking on a link or opening an attachment. And one click is all it takes to compromise your entire system. And here's the irony: quarantining people and having everybody stay home, nobody go out, everyone work at home is very good to stop the spread of corona. It's about the worst thing you can do for cyber attacks. And the reason is simple. When you're in the office, when you're working in a corporate environment, people don't realize it. There's 5 to 6 different technologies that filter out your email. So the probability of you getting a bad email in the office is pretty slim. But now that you're working at home and you're directly connected to the internet, that's all gone. So we're trusting that the user makes the right decision. And right now, with all the fear and uncertainty, it's almost a guarantee. If you get a well-crafted email that says something about corona testing infection, that you can get almost anyone to click or open that link. And I'm not going to tell you, don't click on links, because you're going to protect your family. But here's what I'm going to say. Don't use a Windows computer. Almost all of this malware is written for Windows. So what I recommend, and what I do and I have my family do, is we're checking email and we're surfing the web from iPhones and iPads. They're simpler devices. The malware doesn't work on those devices. Now, things could change, but right now it doesn't work on those devices. And that's just a better option. So first pass of email and web surfing should be on non-Windows computer, would be the first way to protect yourself.
Okay. That is really, really good practical information. What about those of us who are not iPhone people? We're Samsung, we're Android, we're something other. Are we protected from malware on Androids?
Yes, you're still good. Right now, 100% of the malware that we've seen and examined for corona has all been Windows based. So if you're on Android or iPhone or any mobile device, because they're simpler and easier devices, it's harder to write malware, you are protected. Now, here's the warning. If this continues and everyone listens to me and switches over to non-Windows system, in 3 or 4 months, the attacker is going to adopt. So this might not be good in 3 months, but right now it's really, really effective device.
Okay. All right. So for right now, if you're on a Windows computer, you are not clicking on anything, you're not opening anything that, even if it looks like official, especially if it looks like official communication from CDC, because we know that that's what some of these phishers are using to attack. Now, what you talked about, the fact that if you're at the office, you've got 5 or 6 different filters. Those are firewalls, virus protection that the company has set up. Is that right?
That is correct.
What about, okay, so I think about, 3 different groups of people who we're ultimately talking to. We've got the massive companies, the Fortune 500 companies that have a very sophisticated security system and team that are constantly monitoring. Those are probably companies, well, actually we know those are companies that are definitely, they are subject to attack, right? So which is why they've put all these resources towards it. Then you've got like the small to mid-sized companies that have all of a sudden just gone remote. They are less likely to have had sophisticated security teams from just an investment perspective. And then you've got the independent contractors, self-employed, where they maybe have always been working from their home offices. And and I'm not sure the different levels of protection based on the individual. Are you less concerned about a self-employed individual, someone who's an independent contractor, or are you equally as concerned that the spear phishers are out there going after, no matter what size you are, company?
I'm equally concerned about all of them. And the reason is this: your analysis and breakdown of those 3 groups was spot on. However, that third group, the self-employed that work from home anyway, because the amount of attacks was lower, they had lower chance of getting hit. Now, with such an outpouring of corona, the attackers are just, they are just firing everywhere, just trying to hit anyone. Because from their perspective, instead of trying to steal 1 million records from one company, they're going to steal 1 record from 1 million people. So anybody is really a target. So the advice is the same. And the other thing I recommend is, for your daily work, make sure whatever computer, whether you're using a Windows or a Mac, make sure it's up to date. If you have Windows 7 or XP, you have to go to the store while you still can, get a new computer. You got to run Windows 10, make sure it's fully patched. And then I don't endorse any vendor, but pick any vendor you want, and you must have endpoint security installed on your system, because if that's up to date, it does stop a large, not all, but it does stop a large percent of those attacks. So up-to-date operating systems and endpoint security is also another good practical tip for everyone to follow.
Okay, so you probably saw that I started to smile there when you said make sure that your operating system is up to date. I was just complaining to Paul that right before you got on, I got the pop-up that said, need to optimize your system now, and are you ready for an update? And I'm so used to dismissing those for a more convenient time, right? That's not during office hours. And same thing with my phone too, is that I feel like when I first get that update that shows up, I worry that they haven't quite worked out all the bugs yet. And so I want other people to try it first, and then I go in, and that's probably just not a smart thing to do. So help redirect me and others who are not constantly updating our system. Do you do it at the very first opportunity, and do you check for it often? How do you do that?
So we have two different scenarios. During normal times, the approach that you took is actually correct. When new updates come out for your Android or the Windows, we usually recommend you wait a couple weeks or a couple months, because there's usually some problems or some issues, and the attack vectors are usually a little slower to roll out. However, we are not in normal times. We are in DEFCON 5. We are in an emergency situation. So right now, because the increase of attacks have happened at an exponential rate, it's actually better to update immediately and maybe have a little inconvenience of the functionality not tested versus the impact of getting compromised and not having anyone available to help you. So we did switch our advice with this emergency situation, but yet right now we do want to update as soon as possible.
Okay, well, note taken, and I will be updated as soon as we finish this call. So thank you for that really practical advice too. And wow, for you to really talk about the fact that, these phishers have been, I'm calling them phishers. What do we call them? Cyber terrorists? What do you call them?
We call them attackers, hackers, cyber criminals. They are called phishers, so that's okay too. So any of those terms work.
Okay.
I call them evil slime balls, but whatever we want can work.
I'm sure there are lots of different names that can be used. So these attackers used to maybe be focusing on getting all of these records from larger companies, and you're now saying because of this opportunity that has shown up for them, they are literally going after individual records. What does that actually mean? Are we talking identity theft? Is that what that is? That if someone does click through and they end up being subject to an attack, are they going in and getting our personal information and then using that to steal our financial data, or what are they doing?
Yeah, so there's three general types of attacks we're seeing. We're seeing the identity theft, where they're actually trying to steal personal information, personal data, so they can then sell it on the dark web to other criminals. The second one is direct financial. So they're going in and trying to look for bank accounts, financial information, credit cards. And then the third one is going after critical data. Most people now have sensitive corporate information stored on their home computers. We're even seeing cases where the government is considering having classified information stored on home systems so people can work remotely, which is unheard of. So the attackers want that data or that information. The general breakdown that we sort of give is if they're going after critical data, intellectual property, it's usually the Chinese. If it's financially driven, it's the Russians. And if they're trying to just cause disruption or denial of service, it's usually the North Koreans.
Okay, let me see if I got that right. If it's intellectual property, it's typically the Chinese. If it's financial, it's typically the Russians. And then what was North Korea?
Usually disruptive. So they're going to try to delete your data, delete your hard drive, take your systems down, just really disrupt the ability for you to work or operate.
Okay, got it. So I want to talk about a few sort of mainstream programs that I think most people are aware of, to just get your take on, we feel secure, but are we really secure? So if you think about, we use LifeLock right? And I don't know how many different types of companies there are that are like LifeLock that are giving you, like, I've gotten information here and there. I get an email sent to me, hey, this company's been compromised and we have reason to believe that your information could be on the dark web. So first of all, companies like LifeLock, I don't know what the terminology is for that type of company. What do we call those?
Identity monitoring companies.
Okay. Do you recommend that people have that type of service individually?
The short answer is yes. The way that I explain it is LifeLock is not doing anything that you couldn't do yourself. So if you have 1 or 2 hours a day to monitor all the services, put in all your information, gather all the data, and correlate it, you could perform the same activity. Most of us don't have 1 to 2 free hours a day. And especially with the increase of attacks, I am telling everyone I know, whether it's LifeLock or another company, they're not perfect, but they're much better than nothing. And getting more visibility and more insight into potential attacks, that's the name of the game. It's about timely detection. So definitely recommend those type services.
Okay. And so the first person that I think of, outside of course, wanting to protect all of our clients' interests and make sure that they've got the right protocols in place, I think about my mother, who, you know, is in her 70s and she's on technology all the time. Like, she's pretty tech savvy, but I am absolutely concerned that even though she would never click on anything normally, that she might. So should we be ordering a LifeLock service for our parents if we've got parents in that range?
Definitely order that for your parents. I would also go in, and elderly folks, people over 60, are one of the #1 targeted groups of cyber attacks, just because they have money, they didn't grow up with computers, and they're always looking to increase their investment. The other thing, if you can afford it, I know these are tight times, but if you can afford it, I would also order your parents a iPad and tell them stop using their computer and use their iPad for everything, because it's just a much safer platform for them to do their email checking and their web surfing.
Okay. That is such great advice. And I just hadn't even thought about that. And we did that for my mother-in-law. So I think it's time to do that for my mom too. Okay. So identity monitoring, you're saying good for right now. Everyone should invest in that. We should all have that. My next question is, you talked about the fact that a lot of companies are just taking their company online right now, right? They're probably using systems like that. The ones that I think of, the one that we use Google Drive. We have an enterprise version, so a paid version of Google Drive. First of all, is that safe and secure? Is there a difference between a paid subscription like enterprise versus someone just using Google Drive? So talk about a couple of those mainstream technologies that I know a lot of companies have turned to in order to be online.
So I always joke with people that I hate the F word. I think the F word is the worst word ever invented. I wish it could be removed from the dictionary. And of course, the F word that I'm referring to is free.
Okay.
I hate free services. So do not utilize free services for any sort of business. And the reason is simple. Free doesn't mean free. Free means you are giving your data in exchange for the service. So if you look at free Dropbox, free Google, any of these free services, they have direct access to your data and information. As soon as you move to commercial and you pay, they don't have that anymore. The agreement is, if you're paying, they're not going to market, they're not going to access your data, and it's more secure and more protected. So I absolutely recommend, whether it's $39, $49, $59, even if it's a couple $100, if you're going to use cloud-based services, Google, Dropbox, or others, go with the paid version. Do not go the free route.
Okay. That's really, really good advice. What about things like YouTube? I mean, there's so many different free and not free. We don't do free primarily because we don't want the ads and the targeting. I hadn't really thought about it. I mean, other than Google Drive, obviously, but CRMs. Like, I know a lot of people use the free Zoho or something like that. Is it the same story for all of these if they're free?
Yes, the only difference is sensitivity of the data. So for example, YouTube you're giving away public videos. You're giving public data and information. Most social media is the same way. So those, if you want to go free, and in some cases there's only free, right? There's not a paid Facebook. So in those cases you're okay. But anytime it's sensitive data, CRMs, any sensitive corporate information, I would recommend you go and do the paid version, because it's one of those things. I've been doing security for 30 years, and I will tell you it's real simple. You're going to pay. You either pay now or pay later. So you pay now for the service, which is a couple $100, or you pay later when you have a breach, which is going to be $5,000 or $10,000. Every time I've seen clients go the free route, somewhere between 6 months and 24 months, they get hacked. And they always look at me and go, Eric, it's a lot more money to clean up the mess than it would have been just to pay for the commercial service in the first place.
Oh my gosh. That it makes so much sense, but it's like, I understand that there are a lot of people out there who just are, like I have been, admittedly, it's not their number one priority. They haven't been thinking about this. You know, I started thinking a lot more about this when all of a sudden I had clients taking employees remote and starting to talk about whether or not they even had a VPN to be able to work remotely, and there's sensitive data. So yeah, it's really time to heighten our awareness about the fact that this is happening, and it's happening across the board. I still have so many more questions for you, and I know we're already almost a half hour in. And by the way, we are talking with Dr. Eric Cole, cybersecurity expert. He has given so many practical bits of information so far about how we can be protecting ourselves. If you have questions, please type them in. And if we see them while we're live here, I'll try to get those over to Eric. But otherwise, will you be able to engage after the fact as well and answer some questions if they ask?
Absolutely. At the end, I can give my contact information on my website, and I'd be happy to address any questions, because I really want to help people and really make cyberspace safe.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for offering that. And I appreciate your time too. Thank you for being here with us. You've already taught me so much. Let's go back to something that you said earlier. You said that when we are working from the office, we have all these different filters that tend to keep us protected. And then when we come and work from home, especially if we're on a Windows computer, we've lost all that protection. You said make sure that our system is up to date, our operating system is up to date. But then there was something else that you said that we should have, endpoint security. I don't even know what that means. So can we talk a little bit about what endpoint security is?
Sure. So I don't know if you've heard of companies like Symantec, McAfee, Sophos. Yeah, those are endpoint security vendors. So I know the vendors get a little mad when I say this, but really their products are very similar. That they all have similar functionality. So whichever one you can get a better deal on, or whichever one you prefer, I would pick one of those. But here's the trick. They have different tiers. They have a basic antivirus level, and then they have a full suite. You want to go with the full suite. You want to go with the full endpoint security suite. It's going to range anywhere between $55 to $75 for a year. And trust me, worth every penny. It's going to install on your system. It's going to be up to date, and it's going to be able to catch a lot of these attacks. Not everything. You still want to be careful on what you click on, but it'll just make things a little easier for you and filter out some of the bad stuff.
Okay. All right. So that brings me to my next question. I'm going to go back and figure out what we have for sure and make sure it's up to date and that we have the full endpoint suite. Let's just say that for some reason I didn't have that on my computer, or let's say I had the basic antivirus up until now. How do I tell if I've been compromised?
That's a great question, and it's a hard question, because most of these attacks are pretty stealthy and targeted and data focused. So there's no direct way to really know if you're compromised. The advice I give is, if it's less than 6 months where you haven't had the full version, you haven't been patched, you're probably okay. But if you're in a situation where you've had a computer for 2 years, it's a little outdated, you haven't patched it, you haven't had endpoint security, you haven't had really any protection, my recommendation is, there's a lot of sales, there's a lot of things you can order online. I would just get a brand new computer and start over, because the probability of running a computer without protection for 2 years and being compromised is very, very, very high.
Okay. All right, so you heard it. If your computer hasn't been protected for a couple of years, rather than try to go back and even figure out how to patch, which again, I don't know what that means. I don't know. I wouldn't have any idea how to patch anything. So it's probably time for an upgrade. And I know right now everyone's really thinking about how do I reduce expenses. And I just want to share that this could potentially be a major reduction in expense if you are otherwise open to attack, right? Or have been already compromised.
Correct.
So I'm going to go back to another sort of mainstream, I think it's mainstream, software that we use and feel so protected by, but I'm scared to even ask this question. How about password protectors like LastPass? And of course, paid version I'm talking about. Do those, because I don't even want to say out loud how much I have in my LastPass. I'm going to change the password as soon as I get off this. But what do we do about that?
So that's what I call level 2 protection. So level 1, which is really bad, is the same password for everything. So level 2 is having different passwords for all of your accounts and having them stored in a solution like LastPass. That is definitely the right way to go. However, the level 3 that I recommend is going in, and you can either do this in Windows or your iPhone, have your device generate a random password and store it in the secure vault for all of your sites. Because now, instead of having a 15-character password in LastPass, you now have a 40-character random password that's stored encrypted on your device. So that's actually the third level. And then the final level that I recommend is, and most banks, most applications, Google, others support this, is go with what we call two-factor authentication. You have to turn it on, but what that is you go to the site, you enter your name and a password, and then it texts you a one-time password. Now, once again, I know that's a little bit of an inconvenience because you have to do that, but remember, we are living in very dangerous times right now, and even if you want to turn it off in 6 months when you're back in the office, right now, during this scare where everyone's working at home, we have to be extra vigilant with our health and extra vigilant with our cybersecurity. So I would definitely recommend turning on two-factor authentication, even if it's just temporary.
Okay. Okay. So you lost me at one point, and I'm sure everybody else fully understood this, but again, I'm a little slow on the uptake when it comes to some of this. I do understand two-factor authentication. What I don't understand is you said for level 3, you go into your device and you have your device generate a random password. Are you using that random password as your master password for your password protector, or what? I kind of lost the link for level 3. How do you actually do a level 3?
So what that is, that's basically LastPass on steroids. So instead of you having an application and you manage your passwords and you open it up and look up your password and type it in, you're letting your device manage all those passwords. So now every time you go to a site, so let's say you go to www.amazon.com and you go to log in, your computer will actually pop up a message saying, would you like me to generate a password? And you say yes, and then it will store it in its own LastPass in an encrypted drive on the phone. And then every time you go to Amazon, it will recognize and automatically fill in the password for you. So it's actually a little more automated, and it's safer because you don't have to manage the passwords. The computer is doing it for you.
Okay, so I understand that now. And I would have always thought that a paid service like a password protector, like a LastPass, was more secure than having it in my device. Because what if someone ever got my device?
Both LastPass and this is both on your device. So if somebody actually got your device and actually broke your biometrics, the risk would be the same with both of those. Okay. So both of those really have the same exposure and the same risk. The reason why I like the third option, I know it's a little counterintuitive, is because it's longer passwords, they change with a higher frequency, and you don't have to worry about managing it. So it's actually making things easier for you and increasing the overall security.
Okay. And I know you said to do that on your phone or your device. Do you have an iPad? What about when you're on your computer and your computer tries to generate a password? But let's say you're on Windows. Do you allow your computer to generate that password, or would you prefer that we be on the phone to generate any passwords?
I would prefer for any passwords, access, critical sensitive things to do it on a non-Windows device.
Okay.
Now, I love the Gates. They're doing great philanthropic work. So I'm not putting Windows down. It's just unfortunately when you have 90% of the install base in the market, you're the prime target.
Oh, okay, got it. So let's say that people out there have so many passwords stored in their password managers that they're not quite ready to give that up. Is there a way to be extra protective? As an example, go in and change the passwords on a regular basis for financial institutions or things like that. Is there anything that you recommend?
Yes, so two things. So one is encode the information. And what I mean by that is most people, if I go into your LastPass, if I got access to that, it would say Citibank and it would have the full password. And it would say Capital One and it would have the full password. So if somebody got in, they would know the bank, they would know the password, they would know how to access it. What I recommend is just do a little encoding. So for example, what I do with mine is I have B1, which is Bank One. And then I have the first 3 characters of the password and the last 3 characters. Because I don't know about you. I remember the passwords. I don't remember which password is for which account. So if you give me the first 3 and the last 3 letters, I know what the in-between is. I know what it's like. If you start off and say, my first son and hospital, I know that that's my first son was born at Fairfax Hospital. I could easily remember the in-between. So what I recommend doing, if you can, not getting too crazy, but at a basic level, encode the bank and encode the password. So even if somebody did get access, they still wouldn't have all the information.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Good stuff. Last question about banking financial institutions. I know that there's a possibility to heighten security on financial institutions, and anytime there's a withdrawal over a certain amount or a check written over a certain amount, that you can get either a two-factor authentication, or actually they have to call you to get permission. Something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about? And can you say that in an intelligent way? Because I know I didn't.
No, absolutely. What I always say is the good news is banks have a lot of security built in. The bad news is it's not turned on by default. So one of the things that I always recommend is prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. So passwords and two-factor authentication is preventing attacks. However, if somebody does get into your account and does try to transfer money, detection is key. And what most people don't realize is 24 hours is critical. Because if you can detect fraudulent bank activity in 24 hours, you can reverse it. After 24 hours, the money is gone and often you're liable. So what I recommend doing is going in and putting on text alerting, which means anytime somebody tries to do an EFT, anytime somebody tries to cash a check, and you can set the amount depending on your lifestyle, more than $20,000. And if anyone tries to withdraw more than $1,000, you get a text notification. And unless you acknowledge it via text, the transaction will fail. And that's really a great way to have that visibility so you can respond, react in a timely manner. The other thing I recommend, especially during these scary times, because people are really looking for money, cybercrime is increasing exponentially, is to go in and temporarily freeze your credit. Most of us aren't going to be buying houses, taking out loans. And if you do, you can unfreeze it. It's pretty easy to do. But if you freeze your credit, that's just an extra level of protection that makes it that much harder for the cyber adversary to attack you.
And how do you go about freezing your credit? Who do you do that through? Do you go to one of the credit bureaus?
Yeah, you just call up one of the credit bureaus. Now I will go in and warn you, freezing credit is required by the government and it's a free service. However, everyone wants to make money. So most of the credit bureaus also created their own service called locking your credit, in which it's a premium service that you have to pay for, not worth it. But so when you call those credit bureaus, they're going to be like, hey, why don't we lock in and give you extra protection for $79.99? Very nicely say, thank you, but no thank you, and just stick with what's required by the government. It's not worth the extra money.
That is such a good tip, because right now anyone who's watched this would have totally paid the extra money.
Exactly, because you're scared. Yep.
Free. So this is the one tip that you have where free is good. Temporarily freeze your credit. And here's the deal. Even if you temporarily freeze your credit, and let's say you decide that you want to make a purchase on credit, all that means is they're going to reach out to you and you have to okay that particular credit, correct? Like you can still undo that, right? For an individual purchase, correct?
That is correct. For the last 15 years, I always have my credit frozen. It's always been frozen. I always do that. I buy houses, I buy cars, I buy expensive items, and it just means there's an extra step. But to me, that extra step is well worth the protection and security I get from having it frozen.
Amazing. Okay. Tell me, first again, thank you. I should say thank you so much for taking your time and being with us and giving us such incredibly practical, useful advice. What haven't I asked that really needs to be asked and answered on this interview?
I guess the last big thing is just people accepting the fact that no matter who you are, no matter what you do, even if you only have $100 in your bank account, you need to recognize that you are a target and that cybersecurity is your responsibility. So many people think cybersecurity is like accidents, illnesses, and robberies. Those are things that happen to other people. But I will tell you right now, the probability of you or your business being a victim of a cyber attack over the next 12 months is a guarantee. So accept that it's going to happen, recognize it, put together some of those tips we said. Now, we went over 3 of my 5 tips for working from home, but if anyone goes to secureanchor.com/cyberguide, you can download a free guide that I put together that has all 5 of my working from home tips during the coronavirus.
That is so generous of you. So that was secureanchor.com/cyberguide. Is that right?
Correct. Yep,
okay.
Correct.
So I encourage all of you to, you clearly see how much great information Dr. Eric Cole has shared with us today. So please do go and download that. Couple of other questions. Let's say that there's a company out there that already has been attacked. They've had a malware or they've had what is it when somebody goes in and they actually make ransomware? That's the word I was looking for. When you think about the recovery from something like that, are there specific steps that need to be taken after an event like that? Let's say that the company has gotten themselves back, they've gotten everything secured. Are there additional steps that they might not otherwise know about that need to be taken?
Yes, to me, the number one step, if you get hit with ransomware, malware, any of these attacks, phishing attacks, is recognizing that if they got in once, they'll get in again and again and again. So figure out what they did to get in and improve your defenses. Because I see so many companies that get hit with ransomware and they spend all this money recovering, getting back up and running, getting their data back, and they don't actually improve their security. So then they get hit again in 2, 3, or 4 months. So recognize that you are vulnerable and figure out what can we do to improve our defenses to make sure that they do not get back in the future. Really, really good advice there.
Well, Eric, it has been such a pleasure talking with you. I'm a little scared now because I've got some work to do. I have not been as protected as I need to be, even though I kind of thought I was having these extra paid protections. But it's just those few tips that you gave us, freezing the credit, making sure that you have a endpoint security system, and then you're not just using the basic one, that you're going with a full endpoint suite. Making sure that that people in your family also have identity protection services. So there are a few things that you gave us today that I think are just so incredibly valuable. Can we, as we wrap up, like anything that you can share about your background, like a fun, interesting tidbit, either about working with the CIA or some of the companies you've worked with? Like, I'd just like to know more about your world.
Sure. So I started off my life in cybersecurity 30 years ago at the CIA, and we were starting to deploy cyber systems at the time. This was early 90s. And I remember asking a simple question that changed my life. And that question was, how do we know if these systems are secure? So they said, Eric, thank you for volunteering. Why don't you solve that? And it turns out there is no way to prove a system is secure. You can only figure it out by breaking in. So I spent 6 years of my life being a professional hacker. So for 6 years, I basically hacked for the government. And I will tell you this, if it's a computer and it's connected to the internet, it's hackable. It can be broken into. What we want to do is look at how do we make it harder, minimize the damage, and detect the attacks in a timely manner. And that's why after the CIA, I then switched careers to being defense instead of offense to really protect and secure organizations. I'm also an entrepreneur at heart. So I build and sell companies. So I built the company. I sold it to Lockheed Martin. And then for 5 years, I was Bob Stevens, who was the CEO and president of Lockheed at the time. I was his go-to cyber guy. So basically, he gave me a lot of money, an airplane, and said, you fly over the world and fix our problems. So like when the Chinese broke into the Joint Strike Fighter, I don't know if you remember that, I was on an airplane at 2 a.m. in the morning, flying to Texas to try to resolve that and address those issues. And then I also was CTO of McAfee, helping to redesign their product line. And then after we sold that company to Intel, I'm like, you know something? I'm too young to retire and I love this game too much. So I started Secure Anchor and I'm back at it again. And this time I'm on a mission really to educate people, educate executives and businesses, and really make cyberspace a safe place to live, work, and raise a family.
That's incredible. Well, I love that you're still at it. You're helping a ton of people. And just so our network out there really understands, is there a certain type of business that you specialize in helping, or a certain size business? Like, is it, or do you tell me what your ideal client is like?
Our specialty is really helping companies understand the real problem and implement cost-effective solutions that actually work. So there's really no company that's too big or too small. However, I will tell you our sweet spot is usually startup companies that don't really have any IT department, and they're really sort of at that 5 million and they want to get to that next level, but they have so much critical data that a cyber attack can put them out of business. We really can help them implement some very simple, like we illustrated on this call, some simple methods, but very effective methods. And then our second client base are those that grow to about the 500 million to bill. They now have an IT department, but they have no security team. And they really need help transitioning to having that chief information security officer. And we can help implement and roll out that entire program for them.
That is fantastic. So you and I can talk offline. I'd like to make some introductions for you for sure. I think
excellent. Thank you.
So valuable. Thanks again for being here with us today. And we'll make sure that you have all of Dr. Cole's information so that you can reach out to him separately if you've got a need. And remember that you want to go to secureanchor.com/cyberguide for the 5 things that you should be doing to protect yourself as you work remotely. Is that right?
That you're spot on. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to the Evolve to Win show. If you know that there are others who need to hear this information, please share this podcast. I think that this one, above all others right now, is an important one to share. And please make sure that your families are protected as well from any type of attack or identity theft. As we know, it can be way more costly and way more frustrating to get on the back end of this instead of taking the time and investing in getting prepared. So thanks again. Have an awesome rest of your day. And I will let you go save other companies from whatever they need to be saved from in the cyber world. So thanks so much, Eric. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day also.
Take care.